Cairo, Seattle.
Who's your favorite fighter who's not a champion, Bob? I know you love John Jones.
Yeah.
You like George St. Pierre.
Love George St. Pierre.
Yeah.
I love Conor McGregor.
Okay. The guy that's your favorite fighter that's maybe not quite that best of the division fighter anymore.
Junior Dos Santos.
Yeah.
Love him. Love him. He's and a lot of it is just our interaction. You know how it is. It's easy to get swayed. You get a chance to speak to somebody that you watch in any sport, and they're really, really kind and generous and genuine and thoughtful with their answers. It wins me over. I'm a sucker. So they could be really awful people behind the scenes, but on the surface, I'm going, what a great guy.
Yeah. Well,
Junior's one of those guys that I've talked to multiple times, and he's just a sweetheart of a guy. He really is just a good guy. Plus, he's an exciting fighter. He goes out there and puts it on the line.
The funniest thing, and welcome to Fight, it's Danny O'Neill here with Bob Stelton, and I'm trying to think of who Junior Dos Santos fought most recently that we were watching. His last fight.
I think it was Alistair Overeem before. He's had a win since. I have to look it up. But
so we're watching the fight, and you can tell when you've got that personal investment in a guy because you're like, Junior, move your head. Like it's not just because there's the, oh my gosh, the fighter that I like is going to win.
Yes, Ben Rothwell.
Ben Rothwell. And that was the guy that you're like, oh, he's not moving his head enough. Like where there's an element of personal concern for the guy you care for.
I get it. I actually get it like a knot in my stomach as they walk to the cage, as it's time for them to fight. And it's Junior, it's John Jones, it's Conor, it's those guys. I'll get a knot, a sense of anticipation, like I'm the one walking in there, and then I'm nervous. I feel like I got to shake the arms out, and I go, okay, I'm stretching, I'm ready, let's go. You know, it's a weird thing. I've always been like that with my favorite boxers and with these guys as well.
For me, it was Chris Lieben. Mm-hmm. And we're hopefully going to catch up with him here in a couple weeks.
You've been teasing that for 2 months now.
He's been dodging us. But,
he's the hardest guest in the world to book.
Well, it's time zone changes, and Chris doesn't always get up so early in the morning. But I loved watching Chris Lieben, and some of it was because he was the first guy that I kind of followed as a reporter, and I decided I wanted to write about somebody, and he was training out at AMC out in Kirkland. So I followed him. It was actually the lead up to two of his fights, including the one against Anderson Silva, which that fight kind of burst his bubble as a contender.
Right.
But even after that, I mean, Chris was what you'd call a journeyman. He was in the UFC for a long time. He's probably made about $1 million in prize money. But he was always an exciting fighter. Win or lose, he would move forward. He took a ton of punishment. He still has what I would consider the most amazing knockout ever, because there was a guy named Terry Martin who was a heavy puncher, and he hit Chris, and you can see Chris is wobbled, and Chris is about to fall down, and then Chris knocks him out as he's like throwing a zombie punch.
Isn't he one of those guys that's got they've measured the skull and it's just thicker than other people? He's got an unusual capacity for punishment.
Yeah, there's actually a technical term for it. Tito Ortiz head.
Except Tito doesn't take great punishment, as we've seen against Chuck Liddell and
no,
others.
but he's got a big, gigantic melon.
He's got a huge cranium.
Like if you just weighed it that way, we're going to talk to Uriah Faber, which is very exciting for me.
He would be on that list.
He's one of those fighters that his personality's part of it, but also his style of fighting. He's really fun to watch fight because he's not. If he has a boring fight, it's not going to be his fault because he's going to push ahead. He's going to take chances, and he's going to push the tempo.
Yeah, he's exciting. He really is. He's a guy that doesn't look to outpoint anybody. I mean, if it happens, it happens, and it's going to be by virtue of the game plan of his opponent, as you just touched on. But he goes in there. I'm trying to take this guy out, and sometimes it's to his detriment. Sometimes it really works against him. But he's a guy that's extremely tough. He's a great wrestler. He's a great submission guy. The guillotine is such a huge element there at Team Alpha Male. That's how he submitted Dominic Cruz to give him his only loss.
That was in WEC.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it was before that weight division had been kind of subsumed by the UFC.
Right.
The WEC at that point they were putting on fantastic fights.
Yeah, they had Miguel Torres, who at that point looked unbeatable. It was exciting. You had Benson Henderson there. You had some great fighters come out of there. But he's exciting. He seems like, I don't pretend to know him, but I've had the chance to speak to him a number of times. He's just a great guy. He just seems like he really is that California kid. Like, what's up, dude? How are you, man? And And I was telling you before, I had a chance to interview him, and we had a bad phone connection. And I was like, hey, can we call you back, or can you call back, try to get a better connection? And he's like, well, I'm driving to the gym. I'll be there in 10 minutes. You just want to BS till I get there? I'm thinking, how cool is that? He has no idea who I am, and he just want to BS? Sure. We just sat there and BS for 10 minutes. I mean, he's just a very relaxed and just – he doesn't seem to get caught up in the mania. He doesn't get caught up into his image, and I'm the California kid, and I'm this, that, or the other. He's just a dude. He's the dude, man. He's the Big Lebowski. That's who he's going to be when he's older, and he's incredibly exciting, and he does not get the credit, I think, for being tough, for being able to really battle through things. When he fought Mike Brown, he had broken bones in both hands. Obviously the leg was destroyed against Aldo. These are fights that went to decisions. These are fights that he figured, all right, Mike Brown, I'm throwing elbows. I don't have hands. I'm going to go ahead and use both my elbows and grind my way through this. It's not going to be a win, but he's still out there gutting it out. He's incredibly durable and tough.
He's going to be fighting Jimmy Rivera here in UFC 203, and he'll talk to us and explain. Jimmy Rivera is a guy who's a really tough fighter, who doesn't have a huge bunch of name recognition.
I think he's only got like 3 fights in the UFC.
And that guys are reluctant to fight him because of that. This comes on the heels when we talked to Demetrius Johnson last week. He was talking about the politics of picking fights, and that Tyron Woodley, a guy that Demetrius Johnson made it clear, like, that's my guy, love him. But he wants to fight what he considers to be a money fight against George St. Pierre or Nick Diaz, as opposed to facing the next guy in line, Stephen Thompson. I've been thinking about that. We had talked, and I do believe this, one of the best things about MMA is the best fighters fight each other. The best guys, there's not this, oh, we're going to be 3 pounds off, so I'm not going to go to his weight class. The best guys fight each other.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing the purses go up now. Is that changing a little bit?
Yeah, I think it is. I think people are starting to see what can happen, especially if they get sort of the back-end deal that guys like Conor and Ronda and John Jones get. They understand if I'm on the card with these guys, if I'm going up against him, not only am I going to get a bigger guarantee, there's going to be a bigger back end for me. So, and I can't blame anybody for that line of thinking, because your window in this sport is incredibly small. It's a small window. It's a short lifespan in this sport for a lot of guys. Uriah is a unique guy. He's 37 years old. Not everybody's that way. Not everybody can. You see guys that are there, they get cut, they go to other organizations, they come back, they try to come back. I mean, it's a pretty limited lifespan in this sport to be a big time earner. So I kind of get Tyron Woodley saying, you know what, man, I've been a name, I've been a grinder, I've been a contender this whole time. I'm not rich. This is my chance. I've got the belt now. Let me cash in on it.
I get that too. I also would look at and point at Faber as an example of someone that, rather than picking what are perceived to be the best fights for you, to focus on putting on the best fights, because that's the best way to have career longevity. That I'm still going to pay for Uriah Faber fights right now, even though he's not a champion. And honestly, I don't expect him to become a champion. That we've seen what happens when he matches up with Dominic Cruz. He's gone up against him a couple times. I don't think that matchup is going to work out favorably for Uriah.
No, and it doesn't seem like there's going to be a different outcome.
And that's the, but I'm interested in watching him fight. I might be more interested in watching him fight than the main event, Miocic Overeem. I'm more interested in that because I like the way Uriah fights.
Yeah, I totally get it. But he's a guy who's kind of made his money. Even though he hasn't been a champion at the UFC level, he was a champion at WEC. He's a guy that comes from money. He's a guy that's made his money. So I think he's in a different position to sort of say, I'm all comers. I'm not worried about, well, this fight's a bigger money fight or this fight's a bigger money fight. I think he's in a different position than some of these guys that don't come from much of anything, haven't earned much of anything, and then they get put in a position where, hey, I'm kind of calling the shots now. I've got the belt. It's a different mentality, a different approach, and I understand it. You're right. I mean, back to the basic point, the beauty of MMA and more importantly the UFC is that the best fight the best in their primes. And, listen, if Tyron Woodley goes out and fights, George St. Pierre, it's hard to say, well, you took a lesser fight for a payday. That's George St. Pierre.
You're right.
That's George St. Pierre. Yep. He's the greatest welterweight of all time. So
now Nick Diaz.
That's a different fight. That would fall into the category of this is a payday, this is a sideshow. Nick Diaz is going to bring the promotion, and people are going to tune in.
Yeah, it's funny. We're going to see a wrestling match here, between Dana White and Tyron Woodley. I'm convinced. Based on Woodley's tweet, kind of nothing's been set up, nothing's been sanctioned. You're going to see two guys kind of lock horns.
And by the way, just to jump in, what do you think is going to happen now that Joe Silva's going to retire? You saw that news,
yeah,
right?
I did.
And I don't know if it's going to be business as usual, if Sean Shelby will just assume that role and it'll still be, the matchmaking will still be on par with what it's been, because it's been spectacular.
It's been really good. It's not only – Joe Silva does two things well. He pairs guys in exciting fights. I think he's generally pretty good at that, at foreseeing and avoiding the clash of styles that makes really boring fights. When you see on the undercard, it's the undercard of a UFC bout, you see more entertaining fights there than you do on other promotions. And I think that's a tribute to Joe Silva understanding and being able to foresee. No one's perfect. No one can always foresee it. But he doesn't match guys together where it's all of a sudden there's one wrestler who gets the other guy on his back and never lets him up. It's usually a pretty good matchup. The second part is I think he's got a pretty good relationship with the fighters. He's always been the good cop, where Dana has occasionally been the bad cop that comes in and throws guys down of, you want to fight or not? Like do you want to be a fighter speech of stop futzing around and agree to this thing? I'll be interested. Does Shelby, because you certainly, the UFC booker, you've got an ability and almost a monopoly in some respects of being able to make great matches.
Right.
But at the same time, it takes a little bit, because you're having to convince those guys to take that fight. Yes, they're signed to your promotion, and you know that you have 3 fights with them, but they don't have a fight between Tyron Woodley and Stephen Thompson right now. They have to arrange that.
And I'm wondering what his role is in that. If he talks to both guys and Tyron's going, I don't want to fight Wonder Boy. Yeah, he's a good fighter, but it's not a money fight. I wonder if that's when Dana jumps in and gets on the phone and says, hey, Tyron, you want to fight? You want to be a champ? You take this fight, then we'll get you the next big money fight, or something along those lines. If he has to then jump in and be the bad cop, as you talked about.
I think that's what Dana is, and he's the big. I
would love to be a fly on the wall.
I know.
And just the dynamics, because I don't really know. I've heard that Joe is the guy that's in the process. He's part of the process of cutting fighters too. That he's the guy that makes that call. I don't know that for a fact. This is what I've heard, but I mean that's the other side of this that's ugly. That you basically call somebody like a head coach for a football team and say, "I'm ending your dream right now. You're no longer with the UFC."
He's a really important part of that. And are you going to see someone with the same care in developing fighters? Because the UFC's done a great job of that, of getting guys the next big thing. They don't have to go sign the former big name fighter who's been in Bellator for 2 years. They've done a good job of developing and presenting their next generation. I've only been behind the scenes once. It was with Dana. It was before the card here in Seattle. It was in the pre-fighter meeting. It was UFC on Fox. So I can't remember if that's
was
Phil
that the Benson
Davis.
Henderson Diaz fight?
Might have been.
Okay.
Might have been, because the only thing I heard, the thing that I remember the most from the pre-fighter meeting was Dana talking about, hey, the fight of the night bonuses, which, look, for a lot of those fighters, the $60,000 fight of the night bonus, which is what it was at that time, that's going to be 4 times the payday that you would get. A lot of guys were on 7.5, or 15 and 15. 15 to fight, 15 to win. So it's a huge bonus. And then he also told them, it's on Fox. It's a really big deal if you guys curse. I know that sounds weird coming from me, but don't do it. It's a really big effing problem, is what he said. It was pretty entertaining.
Trying not to upset the new TV brand that they inked a $500 million deal with. So that makes sense. But yeah, I would love to just sit in the corner and watch the dynamic. All right. Joe Silva gets off the phone and tells Dana, hey, these guys are having trouble with their manager. They're just not buying into it, whatever. What's the next step? All right, does Dana jump in? Does he call right away? Does Joe call him back? What happens? Are there threats? Are there what? I just want to see how that process works of convincing a guy who may not be excited. Like, we keep going to Tyron Woodley. He's hardly unique. There are other fighters that are presented with fights they're not excited about. I would just love to see that process.
Yeah, it is. Well, we are talking to Uriah Faber. He's going to get in the cage with us next, brought to you by Emerald Green Casino. Uriah Faber getting into the cage with us right now. And Uriah, you got an event coming up. How's the preparation, the weight cut going?
Oh, man, that's always the first battle, and it's going well. I actually enjoyed the process. I'm used to it. It's very familiar, but it is a big ordeal, man. I'm cutting a lot of weight, and and so it's going, that's for sure.
How much weight are you cutting this fight?
I generally walk around 157 or so. So, 21 pounds.
So crazy, man.
Most normal people
Yeah.
will lose 21 pounds in 3 months, 4 months, and they're going to feel good about it. Here you are doing it probably the week of the fight, going to drop 12 pounds or something.
Yeah, probably a little more than that. But yep, I'm definitely experienced at this and know how to do it, and I'm one of the bigger guys for the weight class for sure.
And Uriah Faber fighting Jimmy Rivera, that's coming up at UFC 203. Uriah, how are you feeling about where you're at in your career right now? We watched the fight against Dominic Cruz and kind of the interview in the cage afterwards. Where are you feeling about your career right now?
I feel good. Joe Rogan asked the hard questions, and I think he asked me about retirement, spurred by me saying I just love what I've done and I've had such a great career, which I really truly feel lucky to be doing what I love for a living. So, I'm excited. I'm ranked number 2 in the world in the pinnacle of our sport. I mean, this is the most exposure, the most advanced our sport has ever been, and here I am. I've been here for 13 years at the top of the heap. So, I feel very fortunate and excited to be in the game still, and that's the biggest thing for me. I talk about, I know people that do, friends of mine that will pay money to do 100-mile marathons and do these crazy workouts and because it's their passion. And I mean, you couldn't pay me. You can pay me to run 100 miles. I just don't think I would do it. But for me, I get to go out there and train like a champion and feel like a champion and go out there and put it all on the line and then get paid at the end of the day. So that's the way I approach this thing, and I've always approached it like that. I'm a very fortunate guy, and I do not want to leave any stone unturned or take myself out of an equation because this is a land of opportunity for mixed martial arts. You're in the game. Anything could happen. A title shot, a super fight. And I'm still in the mix.
You brought up the fact that Joe Rogan asked you about retirement, and I know other people ask you about it. Have you changed anything? I mean, 37 years old, a lot of guys aren't fighting at that age, and you've had a long career, as you just talked about. Is there any part of your game that you've changed at this point due to your age? Like, all right, maybe I don't do this part of my game as well as I used to when I was 27, now that I'm 37. Anything that's distinctly different from before?
A little bit. I've actually trained a lot smarter throughout the years in general. Just, as an invincible kid in the sport, I was a chronic overtrainer, which, serves its purpose to get your skill level to a certain level. You kind of need to have that passion and that overdoing it to get your skill set up, because there's a lot to learn from the wrestling, the jiu-jitsu, the boxing, the kickboxing. So, I've probably done a lot less sparring as the years have gone on, just the last few years, of course. But there's a lot of guys in this sport. Verdum's 39, Anderson Silva. You have Dan Henderson's 46 or 45 or something like that, and I mean, there's a lot of guys that are older than me that are having a lot of success in this sport, and I'm one of the guys who's not quite in that upper echelon of age, but still feeling on point, So I get a great gauge because I have kids on my team that have been with me since they're 9 and 10 years old that are now 21 and 22, and I get to go with them, and have guys like Cody Garbrandt, who a lot of people think might be the baddest fighter at 135 pounds right now that I get to go with on a regular basis, and so I know where I stand, and small little adjustments like taking care of my body a little more, or making sure that I limit the amounts of hits to the head and in sparring, that kind of stuff I'm aware of, but everything else is pretty much the same.
I'll tell you what, Cody Garbrandt certainly has the baddest neck tattoo in the game. That thing looks like it hurt like hell, Uriah.
Yeah, man. We actually ranked third on our team for neck tattoos. He got third place, so it's pretty impressive.
I want to see who won first and second.
Seriously, that is a complete sleep.
We got a kid, Jarrell, from Alaska. he's got a homemade snowman. That one took number one.
Uriah, you've always been one of my favorite fighters, and I don't expect that to mean a great deal, that some jackass who talks on the radio really loves the way you fight. But the way you've always
I appreciate that, man.
The way you've always moved forward, your willingness to fight anybody, the fact that you've never made excuses after losses, and you don't try to win sort of professional decisions. You're always moving forward. How important is it for you to have been that kind of exciting fighter?
Oh man, I mean, that's me, and that's the important thing for me. I don't want to be the guy. I mean, it makes me, it makes me laugh that guys are turning down this fight with Jimmy Rivera because they know that he's tough and he doesn't have enough exposure. It's comical, and I'm a guy that I'm not in there to try to score a bunch of points. I'm going to try to finish the fight from the get-go, and that's my mentality. And I mean, the points will rack up on their own, with that mentality, I feel. So, I take a lot of pride in the fighting spirit and in the way that I fight, and that's part of who I am. And I've always said I'm not defined by wins or losses. That's not what makes me who I am. And it's how I live my life and how I compete and the way I do things. So it's very important.
We were talking before you came on, Uriah, just about the fact that I feel like you don't get credit for being a tough guy. You get credit for being a great guy, nice guy, a great fighter, exciting. But, I mean, you've gone in there, and I watched your fights with Mike Brown, and I don't remember, did you have one or two broken hands in that fight?
I had two bones broken in my right hand in the first round, and I dislocated my thumb in the third round. So I had no hands.
Yeah, and I remember you're throwing elbows in that fight, and then obviously the Jose Aldo fight with the leg kicks and everything. I just feel like you're a guy that doesn't get the credit for being just a tough guy in there and taking a lot of punishment. And having said that, I'm wondering if that's something. It's kind of double-edged. You want to be known as a tough guy, but at the same time, it implies, he takes a lot of shots. He can take. There's kind of that other side of it, saying you don't want to be proven to be a tough guy because that means you're showing people, I'm taking a lot of shots and I'm fine.
Yeah, I've actually taken minimal shots in my 42 or 43 fights. Minimal severe punches, but that's something that I do get a lot of credit for. I remember meeting a guy after it was really funny. I was thinking, what the hell is this guy talking about? I was in a bagel shop, and he goes, I used to not be a fan, man, because of the whole pretty boy thing, but when I saw you break your hands, I really became a fan. And I was thinking, who the heck told this guy I was a pretty boy, or what does that even mean? Like, why would you not be a fan because of the way I look or whatever? I'm like, I've been fighting since 2003 on Indian reservations before it was legal in California, before they had weight classes when you could wear shoes and knee guys in the head on the ground, and like this guy, he finally got a little respect, even though I was a decent looking guy, because I broke my hands and fought a 5-round war. I'm like, it's a comical thing. So. But I've taken minimal damage, but there's been some scenarios. I mean, I've broken my ribs. I broke my rib in the first round when I fought Barral for the interim title. Had my leg battered, broken my hand. So that's my body, reacting to a battle. But luckily, I've minimized the head trauma. That's the important thing. I need this brain to make cash and live the good life.
Well, I'll tell you what. The reason you didn't rank in he didn't consider you a pretty boy is you don't rank in the top 3 in team alpha male neck tattoos.
That's right. Yeah, we got. Yeah, I think Cody's in 3rd place, and Andre Feely's right behind him in 4th place. So I always give those guys crap.
Uriah, we really appreciate you taking the time. Best of luck in your fight coming up here with Jimmy Rivera.
You got it, man.
There's a boxing promoter, and I don't remember who it was. And it was one of the many stories written about the decline of boxing, where he talked about that in America, boxing will only be as good as having a great American heavyweight champion. Saying that that's kind of the beacon of the sport, and that even there have been great fighters, phenomenal fighters, Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas Hearns, and Marvin Hagler, who were probably part of a golden era of boxing, none of them are heavyweights. But that belief that a big part of the erosion of boxing in America has been the lack of a great American heavyweight champion. In the UFC and in mixed martial arts, it's never really been that way. The heavyweight champion has never been that sort of iconic, baddest man on the planet sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think it's because people are so familiar with the different cultures that inhabit this sport, right? You've got such a strong presence from Brazil. You've got such a strong presence from Europe, and it's just not a sport that's really marketed that way. It was important for it was Rocky Marciano, it was Muhammad Ali, it was all the way up to Tyson and Holyfield and people like that. Yeah, it was people wanted to be able to identify and hear them communicate and things like that. So boxing was promoted differently. They marketed it differently. It didn't feel like there was a huge Latin presence, but it was at the lower weights. So it just feels like it was dominated by American fighters, and that's what people became accustomed to. Whereas the UFC and MMA in general, from the get-go, has been an international sport. So I think it's what people are accustomed to. I don't think it's necessary to have a fighter who speaks perfect English and needs to be from, middle America and wave the flag and all that stuff and be a Cowboys fan. Nobody cares.
I totally agree with that. And I think I 100%. But the heavyweights, not just the American heavyweight, but the heavyweight has never been as iconic a champion. And maybe I'm wrong about this. And maybe one of the real golden eras was Brock Lesnar. I would think that you make a pretty compelling argument that Brock Lesnar was the most dominant heavyweight champion that the UFC has ever had.
Boy, it was such a short run, though.
Yeah.
Such a short run.
But you look at some of the other guys of who had a longer run. The guys that have been there, the belts changed hands a bunch. You've had sort of the duo of Cain Velasquez, Junior Dos Santos, who had their run. That kind of is what happened after.
Again, brief runs for both.
Right. Tim Sylvia, when the UFC kind of first emerged with the Ultimate Fighter, Tim Sylvia was one of the guys. Randy Couture was a heavyweight champion. He's the one that lost to Lesnar. It's never been as glamorous a division as the other divisions, which is surprising, which is strange. It's different than boxing. And
it's weird because I think the longer reigning champions were in the lower weight divisions, whether it's Anderson Silva, whether it's George St. Pierre, whether it's John Jones, whether it's been all the long reigning champions where people got used to that guy being the champ, or in lower weight divisions, or even Chuck Liddell was a light heavyweight. So you haven't had that dominant heavyweight who's just gone on that run and had that opportunity for people to truly get invested in, wow, he won again. I got to watch this guy fight. Oh, another title defense. The way they have with Anderson Silva and those guys, where it was just defense after defense after defense, and the momentum built, and people sort of caught on to, wow, this guy is fantastic. The belt has changed hands so quickly at the heavyweight division. I don't know that any fighter's been able to develop that fan base or that momentum of being a dominant champion.
You
know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Are you looking forward to this fight? Miocic? Did I say it right? Miocic. Yeah. Stipe Miocic, who sounds exactly like
he's from Cleveland.
Cleveland, yeah, correct. He's an Ohioan.
Yeah, good Cleveland boy.
Salt of the earth, Rust Belt America, Stipe Miocic.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it only because I hope he knocks the head off of Alistair Overeem.
No, I don't like Overeem either. Why is that? Because he should be. He's an exciting fighder, right? He punches, he kicks.
He's got a questionable chin. It's there's excitement. He's either going to knock somebody out or get knocked out. He's got a personality that doesn't jive with me.
He's aloof.
He is aloof, and he's literally the only fighter I've ever spoken to who was less than totally cordial.
Did you?
He wasn't a complete jerk, but he was just kind of like, I could tell he'd rather be getting his teeth pulled than having that interview. But he's got a lot of ability, man. He's got a great resume. You look at this division, you look at the top 10. They don't have a young guy that anybody's anticipating. Whoa, look at this guy. And not in the top 10 anyway. Yeah, there's some younger fighters down there, but everybody in the top 10 right now is over 30.
Yeah.
They're all over 30.
And most of the guys we've seen almost have a run at the top or get a crack at the top and not get there, whether it was Verdun, who was just beaten, whether it was Overeem has never been a heavyweight champion, but that guy's been a premier kickboxer.
Right.
Somebody that was seen there. Did you like it when Bigfoot Silva knocked him out?
I did. I enjoyed it quite a lot.
Then he talked a ton of trash.
Yeah.
Like he had to be held back by the official.
I liked it more importantly because the punch that Bigfoot hit him with initially that rocked him didn't look very clean, didn't look like much of a punch, and all of a sudden his legs went, and I was like, yep, typical Overeem. That's more of my own petty personal bias coming into play there. But, yeah, it's just, I mean, that's the beauty of the heavyweight division is above any other division. One punch truly can change the dynamic of any fight. But it's hard to get attached to any one fighter because of the belt changing so quickly. That's why I love Junior because he's got a great personality, such a great guy. He's like Uriah, the way we're talking about him. He goes in and he's bombing. He's throwing bombs. And that was the beauty of his fight with Rothwell. It was a little more calculated. There was a little more strategy to it. There seemed to be less desire in getting hit. Defense has never been his strongest suit. He's taken a lot of punishment, so it was good to see that kind of fight from him. But Stipe, nice guy. Talk to him. Not that he's a grinder. I don't know that he's a great elite fighter that we're going to be talking about for years to come. And I don't mean that as an insult. I just think he's a grind. He had a war with Junior Dos Santos.
Yes,
if you remember that, just a war. He's just an abs. He's gutty. He's got heart. He's tough as nails. Is he a guy you look at and marvel at the way that he fight, his skill level, the way you did with Silva and Jones and the guys we've been talking about? I don't think he is.
Do you think the lack of a long reigning heavyweight champion, is that a reflection of the division? Like you said, they're bigger guys. One punch changes it more often. It stands to reason that you would have more knockouts with bigger guys. And look, they're wearing 4-ounce gloves. This is entirely different than boxing or something where you can outpoint someone. Is that a nature of the division, or that we haven't seen that sort of dominant fighter? We haven't seen a fighter that big with the skill set of one of the John Jones, George St. Pierre to be able to really dominate.
We haven't seen it yet. I mean, there have been great fighters with great talent, but not that guy. That guy hasn't been there. That John Jones where, again, you just realize we're watching something a little different. And it's not a slight to anybody else, but the fact that Andrei Arlovsky and Josh Barnett are still in the top 10 in this division tells you about the talent level there. And that, I know this sounds like I'm ripping people, but these are guys that are well past their prime.
Not only that, I thought Andrei Arlovsky, Barnett's been a little bit different because Barnett's such a good wrestler.
Yeah,
that
he's a great submission guy.
You've never seen a point where you're like, oh, I just think he's cooked. I honestly, 10 years ago, thought Andrei Arlovsky was cooked.
10 years ago.
A decade.
Yeah.
And he's, credit to him. He's built his way back, but all of that sort of thing. And it's weird. Now you look at the two of them, they're going to fight in Hamburg, Germany, right?
They did, yeah. Arlovsky lost. He was choked out. They were both gassed essentially after about a round and a half. They were, got a little sloppy, a little ugly, a couple of older fighters in there, and they look their age, the division is lacking that spark. It's lacking that guy that everybody is excited to see. I think people are excited to see the matchups, right? They're excited to see Stipe go in there and see what he does against Alistair. But is anybody looking at any one of those guys and anybody in the top 10 going, this is a guy who can dominate this division for years to come?
We'll see if it's Stipe Miocic, long-reigning American heavyweight champion.
From Cleveland.
Become a beacon. Everybody else resounds around. Well, it'd be fun to watch this fight. I'm looking forward to seeing Faber go. I always love watching Faber
fight.
Well,
he's rarely in a dull fight. He's rare. I can't think of a fight where he fought and I went, that was kind of dull. I mean, Dominic did his best to dull things up, but Faber chased him around and unfortunately it didn't come out on the winning end. But he's exciting, man. He's exciting, but that style's not for everybody.
Yeah, the one thing that I regret not getting to ask him, and we had a time limit because when we arrange these things, you can't keep them forever. I wanted to ask him, why doesn't anybody like Dominic Cruz? Why does no one like Dominic Cruz? No one likes him.
I'm going to guess he would have said, dude, we don't have long enough for me to give you all the reasons. We don't have nearly enough time.
Yeah. What did he say after Cody Garbrandt challenged him and said something about a daddy's home or something like that? And then he said, it's going to be a long night for you, homie.
Yeah, he's easy to dislike. I completely understand. As much as I've really enjoyed talking to Dominic, and I think he's a fantastic analyst. He is really good. And he's a great fighter. The guy wins. I understand completely when people go, I can't stand that guy. I don't like the way he fights. I don't like it. I think he's smug. I think he's arrogant. Yeah. I can't debate any of it. I can't sit there and but you don't understand. No, I think they do understand.
It's kind of like with me with the Diaz brothers. Oh, they're not very smart. They're kind of, I get that. Yeah, that's correct. You
kind of just have to wear it all.
Asocial. Yeah, that's right. That's right. A little bit of punk. Punkishness to him, that's correct. Well, we appreciate you listening to Fight, podcast we're having a great deal of fun doing. We want to thank Uriah Faber for joining us, and we look forward to having you back next week here, Fight, an MMA podcast. I'm Danny O'Neill with Bob Stelton.